Hi, welcome to the New Crime Stories channel. Subscribe for more stories. Today we will tell horrible crime happened to young teen girl. So let us go. On a chilly night, as she went to the store to pick up some snacks, the spring of Carrie Nixon's life was abruptly cut short. She vanished after leaving the store, disappearing into the street, gone without a trace from the face of the earth. In this small town, no one could imagine someone harming the elegant girl who lived nearby. Loved by her family, cherished by her friends, and with no body, evidence, or suspects, detectives struggle to solve the mystery. Someone knows where she is, but they're not telling me. I've suspected the neighbors, even considered this one of those cases where I'd catch the criminal, but it's only the strange twists that lead the police to the perpetrator. I was surprised when I received a phone call, and the voice said, "I thought you'd recognize me." Nestled between white-capped peaks and the tranquility of the lake lies the peaceful small town of Osceola, New York. Carrie Nixon, the eldest of 4 siblings at 16, couldn't have been happier in her hometown, known for her composed nature. Carrie had a big heart, thinking of others when many teenagers are self-absorbed. You know you worry too much about your life, but she always took her time to think of others. Famous at school for being everyone's kind friend, at home, Carrie helped her mother care for her sister and brothers. She was very responsible, ensuring the children woke up, ate, dressed, and got on the bus. Her younger sister, Lori, looked up to Carrie, always thinking of her as beautiful and wanting to be like her. While Lori was mischievous and careless about dressing, Carrie was the epitome of femininity, which Lori aspired to. In her early high school years, Carrie was preparing to work with children, looking forward to her first real job as a camp supervisor. She would work with local children in the town we called Playland, where all the kids would go. It was just the beginning for Carrie. She had finally gotten her driver's license at 16 and was eager to learn driving. So she would go to the movies with her friends and to the store. Carrie was growing up fast, and her parents were very proud of their daughter, but they would never see her flourish in her youth. That was after 9 on a Monday night in 1999, where the Nixon family gathered in the living room, watching TV, and Carrie was studying for her new job test. "Wake me up early in the morning," my mother told me. "I have clothes in the dryer, and I need to go to the safety class." I said yes. Her father asked Carrie to head to a small local store to buy some snacks and soda. She wasn't thrilled to walk the 1.5 miles to the store, especially in the unusually biting cold, so she asked her sister Lori to go with her. Carrie insisted so much that I go with her, but I was too tired from playing after school, so she had to go alone. I never thought sending Carrie to the store that night would be dangerous, not in Osceola. The obedient girl Carrie left at 9:30, and while her father waited for chips, he dozed off, as did her mother. I dozed off after Carrie left, and at some point in the night, I woke up and went to bed. After that, her mother didn't wake up until the alarm clock went off. She woke up early the next morning to wake Carrie, but she wasn't in her bed, and the safety book lay on her bed. As the detective in charge of the Carrie Nixon case, I'll recount the events as they unfolded from my perspective. It was a case that would haunt me for years to come. The morning after Carrie's disappearance was a blur of activity. The first sign that something was amiss came when her mother, upon noticing Carrie's untouched bed, woke me with a sense of urgency. Initially, there was no panic, just a mother's concern. "Lori, do you know where your sister is?" she asked. Lori's response was a sleepy and confused no. The house was searched, every nook and cranny, but Carrie was nowhere. The absence of any sign of her return from the previous night was alarming. I could see the fear starting to take hold of her mother as the reality of the situation began to sink in. I was informed by Gary, Carrie's brother, that he had woken up in the middle of the night, hungry for the snacks Carrie was supposed to bring home. He had checked her room, believing for a moment that she was asleep in her bed. It was a fleeting assurance, as he later confessed he might have mistaken a pile of laundry for her in his half-asleep state. The calls began, first to family, then to friends. Each call that returned without news of Carrie added to the growing dread. Her grandmother hadn't seen her, and her friends were clueless about her whereabouts. The realization that Carrie was missing hit everyone like a ton of bricks. As the detective, I watched as her father organized search parties, calling on friends to scour the town. Lori stayed by the phone, a mix of hope and despair in her eyes. The town of Osceola, known for its safety, was shaken to its core. The idea that something sinister could happen here was unfathomable. The investigation took a turn when I visited the local store. The owner remembered Carrie coming in that night. The surveillance footage confirmed her purchase, a mundane act that turned out to be her last known whereabouts. The normalcy of her actions, buying milk, soda, and snacks, contrasted sharply with the gravity of her disappearance. The feeling in my gut told me this was an abduction. Time was of the essence, and with each passing hour, the chances of finding Carrie safe and sound diminished. State Police investigator Richard Sabeck joined the case, and together we delved into the mystery of what happened to Carrie Nixon, the 16-year-old girl sent to the store and never seen again. The town of Osceola held its breath, hoping for her safe return. As the lead detective on the Carrie Nixon case, I remember starting the investigation early in the morning. The first step was to canvass Carrie's neighborhood, asking locals if they had seen her go to the store or noticed any unfamiliar cars. In a small village like this, any unusual vehicle would stand out. Unfortunately, due to the unseasonably cold weather that night, those who might have been sitting on their porches were inside, and it seemed no one saw anything. It was as if Carrie had vanished into thin air. The police expanded their investigation and organized search teams to comb through the village for any sign of Carrie. We had plenty of police officers, forest rangers, and community volunteers searching along the riverbanks. Traffic police set up roadblocks to check cars, hoping someone might have seen a girl matching Carrie's description. The community came together quickly. In a small town like this, it didn't take long for everyone to mobilize. I recall helicopters and people sweeping the streets, but unfortunately, the search turned up nothing. Police Commissioner Bernard Malone followed the search for Carrie with great concern. As a commissioner and a parent, I felt deep sympathy for her family. The first break in the case came about 48 hours later when a young man named Justin Archer came forward with intriguing information. He claimed he was visiting a friend in Carrie's neighborhood and saw her returning home from the store on the day she disappeared. Justin had a couple of minor run-ins with the law and said he only came forward because his mother told him to. He wasn't exactly a friend of the state police, but at least he was cooperative. He came in and said he saw her. This was the first solid lead that directed investigators to trace Carrie's path after she left the store. Since Justin's friend lived between the store and the Nixons' home, the police now knew that Carrie was close to home when she disappeared. She was lost within a distance of just a few hundred feet from her house. This person saw her, and the neighbors did not, so she vanished somewhere between that spot and her home. Clearly, we needed to focus on what Justin had seen. He told the investigators he couldn't provide more details because his sighting of Carrie was very brief. He claimed he didn't speak to her when she approached. He recognized Carrie by sight as she passed by, and he simply got into his car and drove in the opposite direction she was walking. That's what happened, he said. That was the end of his story. The police weren't convinced by Justin's story. Something about his demeanor suggested he knew more than he was letting on. His claims and clever remarks didn't sit well with me. I had a bad feeling about him. As the last person to see Carrie, he was certainly an important figure, and it was clear he wanted to be excluded from suspicion. During further interrogation, Justin's story began to change. Initially, he claimed he hadn't spoken to Carrie. Then he said he had greeted her, and she had responded in kind. This slight shift from his original account drew the investigators' attention. Any minor change in a story can be significant. The fact that he first said he didn't speak to her and then changed his story was a red flag. At the time Justin encountered Carrie, being the last known person to have seen her made him a key figure who could either be involved or have valuable information about Carrie's disappearance. Could this local boy have done something terrible to Carrie? It was 48 hours after Carrie's disappearance as she walked home from a nearby store in Osceola, New York, in 1999. The entire town, including her family, prayed for her safe return. Carrie was the daughter of the Nixons, and it could have been anyone else, but it was Carrie, and everyone knew who she was. The police brought in troublemaker Justin Archer for information. He was a reluctant visitor in Carrie's neighborhood and the last person to see her on the night of her sudden disappearance. However, the investigators wondered if Justin really walked away after seeing her on the street in Osceola. Was he off the beaten path? We had to look at local suspects, especially since Justin wasn't entirely forthcoming when the investigators first asked him about what happened between him and Carrie on the night she vanished. This was viewed as dangerous. His story had fundamentally changed. Any such deviation makes us search more broadly. Justin insisted that the investigators were looking in the wrong direction. He claimed that after he coincidentally saw Carrie, he went straight home and spent the entire night with his girlfriend. Was she in the car? Was she in the trunk of the car at that time? These possibilities were in my mind. Justin passed the polygraph test with good results, but the investigators didn't believe his story. Passing a polygraph test doesn't remove suspicion or prove someone isn't a suspect due to influencing variables. There are operators of the device, like any other profession, some better than others. You have to take all these factors into account. I felt there were some errors, so I kept working on Justin. I wasn't convinced by him, and to clarify, the police decided to talk to Justin's girlfriend. I don't know, maybe his girlfriend said he came home and wasn't troubled, wasn't flustered, but she's his girlfriend, and it's possible she would cover for him. In any case, since nothing was proven to incriminate Justin, the investigators continued to search for new evidence. But it seemed that no one else was out that night. As days passed, the parents faced the possibility of not finding her alive, but for the sake of their children, they tried to maintain their optimism. We didn't talk about our fears in front of the kids. We didn't talk about our fear of Carrie not returning home. We said we were looking for her and would never stop searching for her. Secretly, they were worried, and with the situation being difficult, the father felt anxious about not knowing where his eldest daughter could be. He felt he had failed his family. He returned home the next day and broke down in tears, crying a lot, saying, "I can't fix this." The search for the missing girl expanded daily, but the mother stayed by the phone, waiting for any news. As the detective on the case, I recall the days following Carrie Nixon's disappearance. Her mother sat at home, waiting and waiting to hear any news about her daughter. Then, 3 days after Carrie vanished, state police received a crucial call. A man informed the investigators that they should look outside Osceola for a man named Ted Pryor, known for threatening girls in other towns for years. He was notorious for stalking women in the neighborhood, never arrested because the complainants never filed a claim. But there was no doubt he was a strange character. Ted, a 32-year-old man, lived just a few blocks from the store where Carrie met her fate and disappeared that night. The police wanted to know if he was there that night. Without wasting time, the investigators brought Ted in for questioning. He looked me in the eye and confessed to all those actions, saying, "I never touched anyone, and I never will." Veteran investigators know that voyeurs often escalate to more serious crimes. The question was whether he had made his big move to abduction and sexual assault. However, Ted insisted he was at home watching TV with his mother on the night Carrie disappeared, which his mother confirmed. But the police weren't going to let Ted off that easily. It's clear that a mother might lie to protect her child. The police also sought to monitor Ted while continuing the search for any lead that could bring them to the missing girl, Carrie. Usually, there's evidence, a body, footprints, clothes, blood. Hundreds of things could turn up. Here, the situation was different. There was a girl walking in the fog, and she vanished. The investigators believe Carrie was abducted from the street, but some had another view. Rumors suggested the teenage girl might have rebelled against an unhappy life at home and run away. Such rumors were very disturbing to hear, suggesting she didn't love her family life and wanted to leave. It was painful for us. My parents were very good, so there was no reason for her to want to leave. Some whispered speculations were hard for Carrie's father to hear. I remember hearing a rumor that she was pregnant and ran away. It was hard to hear that about your child. As the seasons changed and the winter chill faded, Carrie's family hoped for their daughter's safe return home. She was always a part of everything we did. On birthdays, we brought her gifts and placed them under the tree. We celebrated her birthday, but the disappointment grew without seeing Carrie. As the year passed, how could a young girl just disappear into the night, and no one knows where she is? The first thing you think about when you wake up and the last thing before you go to bed is what happened. You can't answer something you don't know. While the case turned cold, investigator Richard never stopped trying to solve it. I remember how Kathy Nixon would come to me, asking, "Where is my daughter?" She said she could be your daughter. She was a child and was alive. She went out to the street, was here, and if my daughter disappeared like that, I would feel the same. I would go to bed every night, repeating, "She went out to the street and vanished." There is an answer, and I want it. I will be the one to give it to them. Perhaps this case is the strangest and most dangerous. Whoever abducted her didn't stop there. So, any girl lost in the area, the investigator compares notes with the detectives on the case to see if there's any similarity to Carrie's case. He also keeps an eye on anyone arrested for a sexual crime against teenage girls. We searched every name and every place in the state for abduction cases and the like, but nothing turned up. As the detective on the Carrie Nixon case, I remember the passage of time and how it eroded the chances of finding new leads. Despite the slim odds, Carrie's family agreed to keep the case open, hoping for a breakthrough from the public. We believe that by sharing her story, someone might come forward with information. When we aired her story, calls flooded in from people across the country who were convinced they had seen Carrie. The national exposure led to about 200 sightings. I spent my days contacting police officers nationwide, asking them to check markets or neighborhoods for a girl resembling her. Every tip, no matter how far-fetched, was followed up. One even led me to spend a week in South Carolina following a lead. The case was like a whirlpool for Carrie's family, with sightings here and there stirring mixed feelings. Hope would surge, then fade as leads turned out to be false. After 6 months without any substantial evidence, the story went cold for another 6 months. Then, a neighbor of the Nixons called with news that reignited their hopes. Their children were watching a newly released video of a popular band and were convinced they saw Carrie in certain shots. The video showed a crowd, and among them was a girl who looked like Carrie. We watched the video for hours, playing it in slow motion, and thought, "My God, this girl looks like Carrie." I kept staring, wondering if it could be her. As time went on, the reality that Carrie might never return home set in. All that mattered was knowing where she was and who had taken her. Over the years, Carrie's father grew more suspicious that someone in the town might be hiding a secret about her whereabouts. It's a small community. How could no one know anything? Suspicion could fall on a neighbor, anyone living on the street. In October, as Carrie's family faced their 4th Christmas without her, the police received a tip that brought new hope to the investigation. A police officer investigating a series of strange cases in a nearby village heard an odd story from a resident named Seth Mathers. He claimed that for many years now, someone had been holding an annual remembrance deep in the woods near his property. While walking his dog, he found a bouquet of flowers tied to a small tree, 3 miles from his land. moved in recent months. When the investigators heard this story, they thought it might be connected to Carrie's disappearance. Killers often return to the site where they buried the body for various reasons, to see if the buried person has been discovered or to relive the crime. So, investigator Sabek went to speak to Seth and inspect the strange shrine. He found the bouquet, clearly commercially made, with lilies that don't grow here, brought from a flower shop. Convinced that the site of the flowers had become hallowed ground, the investigators came to search for a burial site. We had these sniffing devices stuck in the ground, smelling for decomposing bodies. We spent several hours searching the area, but nothing was found. We had no new leads. In the relentless pursuit of any clue about the person who bought the bouquet of flowers, the detective headed to the town. There were a couple of florists there, and he inquired if they had sold any bouquets last month that included lilies and a ribbon. The answers were fruitless, but the detective didn't give up. He had the U.S. Border Patrol near the Canadian border install sensors near the flower sites so that if anyone approached the area, they would know. After months of false alarms caused by animals or the wind, the call he had been waiting for finally came. It must be him, I thought, the one who's been replacing the flowers. But whoever left the new bouquet had already left by the time I got there. It was a hard blow for the detective, who knew it would be months before the flowers were replaced again. However, luck changed when he saw Seth Mathers walking his dog along the road. I asked him if he had seen a car, and he said yes. Due to recent burglaries, he had noted the car's number. I couldn't believe it. This was real. There's a cabin every half-mile on that road, and this person had the number. It was an unexpected stroke of luck. Could this be the key to unlocking the mystery surrounding Carrie's disappearance? The detective tracked the car number and found it registered to Barrett Michaels in Connecticut, 200 miles away. He immediately called Barrett and asked about his regular visits to upstate New York. I bought a piece of land there with my wife and daughter, Barrett explained. We were going to build a ski lodge, but my daughter fell ill with cancer and passed away. We buried her there. Barrett and his wife had buried their daughter's remains on the land they planned to make their holiday home. They owned the land and would come regularly, bringing flowers to visit their daughter's remains. The detective verified Barrett's story and found it to be true. I was devastated. I had hoped this would be the lead we needed. Of course, it wasn't. It explained why the flowers were there, and I was deeply frustrated. Carrie's family spent the following years waiting for information that might take their minds off the pain. I dealt with a daily struggle, not wanting to leave life without knowing where she had been. The detective knew he would get a big break that would solve the mysterious puzzle, and nearly 7 years after Carrie's disappearance, it came. I received a phone call from a lawyer who said he represented someone who wanted to talk to me. We want to make a deal. Also, 6.5 years after Carrie's disappearance from Osceola, New York, the investigators received a phone call that might contribute to solving the case. A local attorney had a client who claimed to know something about Carrie's case. The detective immediately remembered the name. It was Robert Jones, whom I had arrested with his wife for a bank robbery. As we prepared for trial, Robert faced prison time for robbing 2 banks in Maine and 2 in upstate New York. Since his wife had provided the getaway car in one of the robberies, she would also be going to jail. That's why Robert offered to help the police solve Osceola's most mysterious case. What happened to Carrie Nixon? They had 2 children, and Robert didn't want his wife to go to jail with him. He wanted her to be placed under surveillance instead of going to jail. He called his lawyer, and his lawyer contacted me. The investigators had to consider whether the seemingly good family man might be making a false offer to help his wife. It seemed he was just a neighbor we would never arrest because he was somewhat of a deviant or a harasser, as you know. But the investigators learned from a friend who had helped him in 2 robberies that he was a very bad person. When Robert robbed the bank in Osceola, he directed foul language at the girl there, and in another robbery attempt, he tried to kidnap a woman outside the bank. When later questioned about why he kidnapped that woman, Robert said he was going to rape her and maybe kill her. Now, in the room with the detective and his lawyer, Robert revealed his secret about Carrie. In a chilling turn of events, the detective learned that Robert, who had been living in Maine the year Carrie disappeared, was actually in town visiting relatives the night Carrie left the store with snacks for her father. Within minutes of being questioned, Robert confessed to abducting Carrie from the street, raping, and killing her. His detailed description of the girl and the exact contents of her bag convinced the detective that only the perpetrator could have known such specifics. Robert's motive was as bizarre as his actions. He kidnapped Carrie because he believed his wife was unfaithful. In a fit of rage against his wife, he left Maine with the sole intention of finding a girl to make his wife pay for her supposed betrayal. He saw Carrie leaving the store, carrying a bag, and thought, maybe she's the one. Hiding in his car, he watched Carrie, waiting for the right moment to attack. Just a few blocks from her home, he seized her, forced her into his car, and drove to a secluded cabin in the woods, about 3 miles from her parents' house, where he brutally raped her. After the assault, instead of returning her home, he took her deeper into the woods. When she realized they were going the wrong way and protested, he strangled her and then shot her twice. Robert had lived with this secret for years, not even telling his wife. But now he was confessing to keep her out of jail for a robbery they had committed together. The only way to verify Robert's confession was to find Carrie's body. On January 20th, nearly 7 years after Carrie's disappearance, Robert led the police 3 miles from the Nixon family home into the woods where he had taken Carrie that night. In the cold, snowy forest, Robert pointed to the spot where he said Carrie lay. Digging through the snow, the detective found a pink pair of pants and knew it was her. For the detective who had spent years searching for Carrie, this moment was bittersweet. It was a relief to close the case, but it was also a tragedy because Carrie was indeed dead, and her family would now have to bury her. The detective personally delivered the news to Carrie's family, his eyes filled with tears, saying, "We found her. She's with us, and we'll bring her home." The revelation of the man responsible for Carrie's abduction was a shock to the small community. Robert Jones was one of their own, known to the family, a familiar face in the community. No one would have suspected him capable of such heinous acts. But Robert was a very evil man, and the reality that someone could do such a thing was a stark reminder of the potential for evil in anyone. The commissioners added charges of kidnapping, rape, and murder to the bank robbery charges against Robert Jones. After his wife was sentenced to house arrest, Robert was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. This provided little solace to Carrie's family, who would always miss their beloved daughter. Their consolation now lay in knowing that she had returned and was buried near her family, where she belonged. Carrie's spirit lives on in her nieces and nephews, who have heard wonderful stories about their kind aunt. Carrie lives on in them, so in a way, she is still present. Learn more suggestions.